She humiliated her at a rooftop party, laughed, called her unemployed, and offered her a job printing papers. 2 weeks later, that same woman walked into her office as the CEO who just fired her entire team. This isn't just revenge, it's what happens when people mistake silence for weakness. Would you have kept quiet or struck back? Drop your thoughts below. Still unemployed, huh? Rachel's voice rang out, accompanied by a ripple of laughter echoing across the rooftop lounge. I turned my head just enough to catch her expression, eyes gleaming beneath artfully arched brows, lips curled in that familiar smirk, sharp and polished like the edge of a well-maintained knife. She stood in the center of a circle of power suits and cocktail dresses, holding her glass like a torch. And me, I was the shadow cast behind it. You guys, this girl used to want to be a change maker. Now she's just making coffee at home, I guess. The group erupted. One of the men choked mid-sip, wiping his sleeve dramatically. Another woman leaned in to whisper something before glancing over at me and stifling a laugh. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just raised my glass of water, still untouched, and brought it to my lips like armor. The breeze carried the faint scent of rooftop roses, filtered city air, and that peculiar brand of artificial charm Manhattan high flyers wore like cologne. This was the NYU Alumni Spring Mixer, technically a celebration of who we'd all become. But for some, it was more of a stage, and Rachel had always been addicted to the spotlight. She wore a backless crimson dress, a pair of stilettos that could kill, and a confidence born not of security, but performance. Years ago in college, I had mistaken it for brilliance. I was wrong. You should totally apply as my assistant, she added with a laugh. You'd be great at printing things. Another wave of laughter. I looked at her. Not past her, not around her, right at her. 5 seconds. That's all it took to catalog the new Rolex on her wrist, the tightness in her cheeks from her latest injectable round, and the faint tremor in her glass that told me her voice was louder than her certainty. I turned away. Toward the bar at the far end of the terrace where the noise softened and the marble counter glowed under muted gold light. Saul the bartender nodded at me, not in recognition, but with the neutral kindness of a man who had seen enough human posturing for 3 lifetimes. Old friend, he asked, drying a glass. Close enough, I murmured. He placed a glass of sparkling water before me. I wrapped my fingers around it, feeling the condensation bleed into my skin. No ice. I didn't want to dilute anything tonight, least of all the truth. Rachel still held court behind me, likely unaware that the company she worked for, the one she bragged about, bled for, and represented so proudly tonight, had spent the last year running its entire logistics system through the AI infrastructure, built by a firm named Everlyn Dynamics. And she had no idea who built it. E. Morgan. To them, just a name in email threads and contracts. To legal teams, a signature. To the boardroom, an invisible presence. To Rachel. Apparently an easy punchline. But that was the point. I had spent years designing this reality, building something so structurally sound, so deeply integrated that I no longer needed a face to be powerful. Silence became my strategy. Invisibility. My leverage. They didn't know me. Not anymore. I took a slow breath, steadying myself against the swell of something between rage and amusement. The former had burned through me for months. The latter, that was new. That was what told me the plan was ready. The party swirled behind me, laughter, applause, an over-enthusiastic alumni speech, and I drifted away. No goodbyes, no glances back. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped in alone, the city stretching far below like a blueprint only I could read. My reflection stared back at me in the polished steel panel, unassuming, underestimated, and completely in control. I stepped out of the elevator, pulled out my phone, and typed, Plan A is a go. I want Rachel and her team listed. E. Morgan just approved the funding extension, but we'll meet the partner face-to-face for the first time next week, the assistant said over the internal call. Ava didn't flinch. She leaned back in the steel and leather chair inside Everlyn Dynamics' 47th floor executive conference room, eyes scanning the digital dashboard projected across the glass wall. Rows of metrics pulsed in soft blue light operations, pipeline velocity integration errors, all precise, all calm, but her gaze narrowed as it settled on a specific spike. Q4 bonus manipulation flagged. She tapped twice. The screen zoomed into a cluster of emails extracted from a partner company's internal system. Subject lines like ease, a ghost all. Let's just fudge the weeklies no one's checking, and the one Ava had already memorized. We're just milking that platform deal. They won't ever check. That one was from Rachel. Ava exhaled through her nose. The timing was almost poetic. Behind her, her lead legal advisor, a woman who had once helped Google rewrite its IP policy for emerging AI, entered with a folder. The review's complete. The data manipulation violates 5 clauses in the contract. If we invoke Article 6.2, we can trigger immediate revocation of license access. Ava turned her chair toward her. Reputation damage clause applicable. The mockery of our leadership, even under pseudonym, qualifies under defamation and professional misconduct in a signed partnership. Perfect, Ava said. Draft termination letters for Rachel Lynn and her direct reports. I want all communications to run through legal. No contact outside protocol. Her assistant stepped in, next tablet in hand. We've scheduled the face-to-face meeting with Lynn's team at their HQ. They think it's just a quarterly review. Ava stood adjusting the sharp lapel of her blazer. The whole room seemed to shift as she did the silent snapping into readiness. They don't know who they're dealing with? Her assistant added. They don't have to, Ava said quietly. Not until I walk in. She crossed the room, heels echoing softly against the polished concrete floor. The walls were smooth matte white, accented with black steel trim and kinetic artwork that shifted in response to sound. It was minimalist cold to outsiders, but to Ava, it was clarity incarnate. She stepped into her private office. A panoramic view of Manhattan stretched out like a chessboard. She placed her hand on the biometric scanner, unlocking the encrypted console built into her desk. The original founder's file popped open. Everlyn Dynamics, incorporated by E. Morgan. She clicked to sign the next phase of contract termination. Her stylus slid smoothly across the screen, digitally rendering the signature that had been hidden from the world since day one. Elegant. Anonymous. Powerful. E. Morgan. She looked up at the security camera in the top corner of her office. She knew her servers recorded every gesture, every word spoken in this room, and tonight she wanted the moment saved. It's almost time, she said, eyes locked with her own reflection in the dark lens. A few floors below, in one of the operations pods, her assistant was already dispatching internal notices for departmental compartmentalization. No leaks, no panic. This wasn't an impulsive revenge scheme. This was the final phase of a meticulously built firewall. Months ago, when the first anomalies appeared in Rachel's team's deliverables, Ava had chosen silence. She watched, observed, measured not just their actions but their arrogance. The way they had treated the faceless partner funding their infrastructure like a joke, a donor to be milked, not a relationship to be respected. That mistake would cost them everything. Across town, Rachel reclined on a gray sectional wine glass in one hand, speakerphone on with a college friend. The CEO of Everlyn's coming to our office next week, she groaned. Who even knows what he looks like? Ava walked into the conference room. Black dress hair pulled back, face composed. Rachel froze. It was subtle at first, a flicker in Rachel's eyes, like her brain had short-circuited for half a second trying to categorize what it was seeing. Ava Morgan here. At her office, Rachel stood up too fast, nearly knocking her chair back. What are you doing here? Ava didn't answer. She placed her leather folder on the sleek glass table, then calmly pulled out a document as if this were just another board meeting. The room fell silent. Around the table, Rachel's team, the same ones who had laughed at the rooftop party, sat slack-jawed. A few glanced toward the door. Others fidgeted with pens or phones, suddenly unsure of the gravity of the meeting they'd walked into. Ava finally looked up. I'm here as the founder and CEO of Everlyn Dynamics. She said, her voice clear and firm. Rachel opened her mouth, but no words came out. Ava's eyes swept the room. The company that currently owns 37% of your infrastructure through our proprietary data licensing agreement. Murmurs rippled across the room. One of Rachel's junior analysts, the one who had sent the ghost CEO meme in a group thread, went visibly pale. Behind Ava, her lead counsel stepped forward and placed a thin stack of printed documents on the table. "We're here to deliver formal notice of contract termination. Effective immediately," the lawyer said. "Please refer to the highlighted clauses regarding ethical compliance and fraudulent data practices." Ava tapped the top of the stack. "Your team manipulated KPI metrics to inflate quarterly bonuses. You also publicly ridiculed your primary infrastructure partner in internal communications. We have all of it, archived emails, chat logs, access, timestamps." Rachel swallowed hard. "You must be joking." Ava's expression didn't shift. "Do I look like I came here for a joke?" Silence. Rachel stepped forward slightly, her voice rising brittle with disbelief. "You can't do this. You don't know what this will do to our department, our bonuses, our—" "I already did." Ava interrupted her tone, slicing clean through the air. She turned to the lawyer, who slid a digital tablet across the table. On screen, each name on Rachel's team appeared beside the word terminated. Rachel looked down, stunned. "You're really going through with this?" "You mocked me," Ava said calmly, eyes locking onto hers. "You thought I was beneath you. Unemployed. A joke. You said I should be your assistant." The blood drained from Rachel's face. "Well," Ava continued, "this assistant just removed your access to every tool you've used to build your metrics for the past 18 months. And I did it legally, contractually, and publicly. The room was now a vacuum. No one dared move. The office's actual CEO, a stiff balding man in a gray blazer, stood quietly at the edge, too cautious to intervene. He nodded once to Ava, acknowledging her authority. He wasn't going to fight a legal breach when his company had everything to lose. Ava took a final breath and closed her folder. "This meeting is concluded." Rachel's voice cracked, laced with something between fury and desperation. "This isn't fair." "You wouldn't know what fair looks like," Ava said. "But you're about to learn." Ava gave a small signal. Two corporate security personnel stepped into the room from the hallway, silent and professional. No drama, no shouting, just protocol. They walked up to Rachel and her team, pausing only to let Ava step aside. Ava gestured, and Rachel, along with her group, was escorted out of the room. Rachel Lynn and her team have been terminated by Everlyn Dynamics due to severe violations. We decline to comment further. The headline spread like a crack of thunder across the industry's most watched forums. The article beneath it was clinical, just bullet points and confirmations, but the subtext rang louder than any press release ever could. A group of elite employees had been publicly dismissed by a previously anonymous founder who turned out to be one of the most quietly influential players in the logistics AI sector. And she hadn't even raised her voice. "I don't need to shout to prove anything." Ava's words from weeks ago echoed in a comment thread beneath the article, now pinned by a moderator. It had gone viral, screen-capped, reposted, turned into motivational quotes. But Ava had said it to herself, and she meant it. In the open layout workspace of Everlyn Dynamics, sunlight spilled across the smooth concrete floors, casting soft shadows over greenery and collaborative pods. Laughter bubbled from a group near the espresso bar engineers, brainstorming over a new UX prototype. The energy was different now, alive. Not fearful or pressured, but energized, liberated. Ava sat in a glass-enclosed room overlooking it all. She wasn't doing interviews. She wasn't entertaining podcast requests, keynote offers, or legacy media spotlights. Not yet. Instead, she opened her laptop and reviewed the week's internal feedback reports. At the top of the page was a message from HR subject former candidates flagged by Rachel Lynn's team. Status update requested. Ava clicked into it. A list of names filled the screen. Applicants from the past year who'd been blacklisted, rejected without proper cause, or dismissed after probation. Many showed similar patterns: diverse backgrounds, unconventional resumes, non-Ivy degrees. All passed the skill tests, all rejected. She highlighted the first 5. Action restore to active pipeline. Mark for reevaluation. Meanwhile, across the city, Rachel sat alone at a cafe tucked between high-rise shadows. Her makeup was untouched, but the corners of her eyes looked tired. In front of her sat a half-drunk cup of chai and a folded copy of TechWatch Weekly, the one that had dared to run her photo beneath the title, "When Ego Breaks Code, A Quiet Reckoning." She tapped refresh on her inbox again. Still nothing. A week ago, she'd sent out 17 carefully crafted applications, each tailored, each pleading in tone, but cloaked in confidence. So far, 9 auto-rejections. 6 cold silences, 2 vague, "we're not moving forward." Replies that seemed to know exactly why but refused to say it. One rejection stood out. It read simply, "We're committed to building teams with integrity. We wish you the best." She closed the laptop and stared out the window, eyes darting past the people walking by, interns, engineers, startup hopefuls. When she was them. Or rather, she was above them. And now no one looked twice. Her phone buzzed. A notification from LinkedIn. "Your professional profile has been marked low trust by verified corporate accounts." She stared at it for a long time, then slowly set the phone face down. Back at Everlyn, Ava leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Her assistant stood beside her, holding a tablet. "The rescreening calls are prepped. First one's Maya." Ava smiled slightly. "Connect me." Maya's voice came through the speaker a moment later, breathless, hesitant. "Hello, it's Ava Morgan." Ava said gently, "I read your old application. I see what Rachel's team did. You deserved better." A pause. "You want to come back?" There was silence, then a laugh, shaky but real. "Yes, I do." Ava closed the call and opened the next file. One after another, the names appeared, names that were once overlooked, judged, or quietly excluded. She didn't just want to grow Everlyn. She wanted to rebuild it on different terms from the ground up with the people who had been pushed to the sidelines by the exact kind of culture Rachel had represented. She refreshed the database one more time and pulled up the archive labeled "Rejected for Personal Bias." Archived by Rachel Lynn, Q1, Q4. She scrolled through it, name after name, then paused, hovering her cursor over the first. Restore. Then the next. Restore. At the top of the page in a comment field, she typed a single word. Revive. And she clicked save. You don't just build a company. You shape how people are treated. Ava's voice carried clearly across the room. The onboarding hall was full rows of new hires' faces, bright with both nervousness and hope. They came from different backgrounds, disciplined cities, but they all had something in common: they had been chosen to help build what came next. Ava stood at the front, not behind a podium, but in the center. The room was quiet in that electric way where people know they're witnessing something that matters. Behind her on a sleek screen, a single phrase glowed, Everlyn 2.0, built with intent. "I don't care about optics," Ava continued. "I care about what happens in rooms no one watches, how feedback is given, who gets heard, who gets left out. This isn't a second chance for Everlyn. It's a first time doing it right." She didn't smile, but there was something warm in the way her eyes softened. Later that morning, she joined a smaller group in the strategy room, a bright space with glass walls and a tactile planning board covered in Post-its and digital mock-ups. Lisa Tran was already there, reviewing integration charts. She looked up as Ava entered, then stood and extended a hand, firm but with a glint of disbelief still in her eyes. "I still can't believe I'm back," Lisa said. "You never should have been pushed out," Ava replied. "And you're not just back. You're leading. The CTO role is yours." Lisa blinked. "Just like that?" No, Ava said. "Not just like that. You earned it years ago. We're just undoing what never should have happened." Across the table, Maya sat quietly, notebook in front of her. She'd only spoken twice since rejoining, mostly watching processing. Now she looked up. Ava turned toward her. "NLP," Ava said. "I've been reviewing the internal audit. The work you did before Rachel dismissed you, it was exceptional. I'd like you to lead the team." Maya's pen slipped from her hand. "Me," she said, voice cracking. Ava nodded. "You." There was a long pause. Then Maya's eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth, nodding quickly. "Yes, I'd love to." No applause, just quiet recognition. the kind that matters more. After the meeting, Ava returned to her office. The transition wasn't glamorous systems to rebuild documentation, to rewrite processes, to untangle. But piece by piece, the architecture of a new company culture was forming. She had introduced anonymous peer review tools, non-hierarchical feedback rounds, and a new ethics clause embedded directly into their project pipeline contracts. But most importantly, she was present. She walked the halls, asked questions, listened, really listened when someone offered concern. Her leadership was no longer hidden behind the E. Morgan mask. And with that visibility came a responsibility she took seriously. In the elevator on the way back to her floor, she remembered something a professor had once told her. Real power is changing culture, not toppling a person. That was what she was doing now. Not revenge, not cleanup. Rewriting the code of how a company should treat its people. Back at her desk, her assistant knocked softly and handed over the tablet. "You've got an email," she said. "It's from Forbes." Ava raised an eyebrow and opened it. Subject: Ava Morgan. "Congratulations on making Forbes 30 under 30. Would you agree to appear on the cover?" Ava stood on stage at the Women in Tech Summit. No microphone, no spotlight, just a small fireside session. Yet the room was utterly still. Rows of young professionals, founders, coders, analysts all leaned forward, their attention fully locked. No one was scrolling. No one whispered. It wasn't about the glitz. It was about the quiet gravity of presence. She didn't start with her title. She didn't list her company's valuation or mention the restructuring headlines. She simply began. "Once someone told me I'd be better off printing papers for someone else." The room remained silent. They didn't know I was funding their infrastructure. A few heads turned. A few smiles flickered. But most remained still, listening, really listening. "I don't tell you this because I want to impress you." Ava continued. "I tell you because for a long time I let their assumptions define how I moved, how loudly I spoke, how much of myself I shared." She took a breath. "It's okay if they underestimate you. What matters is that you don't underestimate yourself." From the front row, Maya watched with wide eyes, her fingers pressed gently together in her lap. Beside her, Lisa sat with arms crossed, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. They had heard these words in practice through policy and real decisions. But here, Ava spoke them not to employees, but to the future. She continued, "I once said to someone, 'I'm not here to argue. I'm here to clean house.' And I meant it. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because we deserve better than tolerating what breaks us." The applause started small, a soft wave of claps that grew in momentum. Ava held up a hand, gently signaling she wasn't done. "I didn't want to build a company that looked successful. I wanted to build a company that was just, that didn't punish people for being quiet, or different, or unfamiliar. That gave second chances and first chances to those who never even got in the door." She paused. "You don't need to scream to prove anything. You just have to wait for the right moment and close the door on the right people." This time, the applause came fast, full, and echoing. Later that night, a 30-second clip from her talk, the close the door quote, exploded across social platforms. Screens recorded, subtitled, shared. Within hours, it was stitched into TikToks by students, reposted by corporate leaders, and used in graduation slideshows. And somewhere between all the noise, Ava sat quietly at her desk in the Everlyn office, a warm mug of tea between her palms. An alert blinked in the corner of her screen, confirmation of a partnership with a Fortune 100 enterprise. A landmark deal built on transparency and clean infrastructure. She didn't smile. Not because she wasn't proud, but because she wasn't finished. Her phone buzzed. A direct message from a young woman she didn't know. "Thank you. I almost left tech this year. I won't now." Ava read the message twice. Then she closed her eyes briefly, letting the weight of that sentence settle. Outside the summit venue, the sun was beginning to set. Ava stepped out from behind the curtains and walked calmly toward the edge of the stage. The lights had dimmed, but the applause was still rising. She never raised her voice, but the world heard her loud and clear. What began as a public humiliation became a calculated reckoning, one that exposed the rot behind polished titles and hollow power. In a world quick to dismiss the quiet ones, Ava proved that dignity and strategy could echo louder than any insult. Like the final chord of a long forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but when it does, it silences every lie that came before. Sometimes the boldest act of defiance is simply not walking away.